good afternoon. If it's a Friday at 2:30, it's all things advocacy with AARP North Dakota. Josh Aspig, State Director for AARP in North Dakota, and with me, as always, Janelle Mose. Janelle, good to see you.
Yeah, you too. A little strange not being in the same room with you, but
I was
here
just
we are, right?
I'm having flashbacks to the 2021 legislative session is what I'm having here as part of it. Because Janelle's at home today doing this. I'm at home today doing this. We had some technical considerations we had to take into account. So we're both doing this from home today as part of it. Janelle, before we kind of just jump into it, give me kind of, it's week 2 now back after the crossover break as part of it. You've been up there every single day. I had a chance to get up there yesterday and today. Give me your impression. Things starting to click along again. Is it slow again? Just kind of your overall impression about how the session is unfolding as we've gotten to this post crossover space.
The pace has definitely picked up, and I say that because I had to be in 3 places at once, at least 2, if not 3 times this week. So, they're really starting to pick up the pace with the policy bills. A lot of discussions are happening with the budget, a lot of public testimony. So I think they know that time is not necessarily on their side, and they've really got to start to chip away at some of these really difficult issues they're dealing with this session. So yeah, it's picking up pace.
Yeah, it clearly has been flying. I felt the same thing today. Hearings that should be taking much longer than they are. And I want to give credit to both committee chairs for the 2 hearings that I was a part of. I think they did a nice job making sure they allowed space, but it was very clear that they had a lot of stuff they're trying to grind through and get through and trying to move relatively quickly. Is part of it. And you mentioned it already and kind of alluded to it already, but this week was super busy for AARP and our priorities. So talk a little bit about what happened this week, and maybe let's just start with what happened today and yesterday with pensions.
Sure. Yeah. Post crossover, we're still tracking about 100 bills, and 3 out of the 4 priority areas that we're tracking this session, we're up in committee. And the one that you mentioned in particular is the pension bills, or the looking at whether or not the state should retain the defined benefit plan, or should they move away and adopt a defined contribution plan. So House Bill 1040 was heard yesterday in committee, and you were excited. You got to put on a suit for the first time in a couple of weeks to be there on behalf of AARP. But House Bill 1040 is the bill that was studied during the interim. It does close the defined benefit package for the state. And then on the flip side, Senate Bill 2239, which retains the defined benefit package, or the pension, was heard in a separate committee in the House this morning. So you've really got 2 competing issues, competing ideas about what the state should do to, look at either retaining what they currently offer for state and public employees in terms of that defined benefit, or do they move away from that to a more a 401k style plan, or a defined contribution. So they were really good hearings. A lot of good issues were brought up. There's a lot of concern, and I think everyone's been talking about this, and it's in the media. This is really the one issue that's going to define this legislature and really keep them here up close to 80 days.
Yeah, absolutely. I had the opportunity to put on a sport coat and suit and tie 2 days in a row, and it's been a while as part of it. And so I agree. It was very clear after listening to the parts of the House Bill 1040 hearing yesterday, and then being a part of and the extended hearing on Senate Bill 2239 today, that there are 2 very different approaches. Each chamber had kind of laid out a marker as part of it, and I think this is an issue that will continue to evolve and continue to be engaged. And so just give everyone a teaser for a little bit later. If this is an issue you care about, I encourage you to start reaching out to your legislators and encouraging them to support Senate Bill 2239 and protect secure retirements as part of that. So with that, let's jump into the other thing that happened this week that is on our priority: prescription drugs and prescription drug prices, and talk a little bit about the insulin cap bill.
Yeah, that bill was heard earlier this week in House Human Services. And if folks remember, the insulin cap bill caps the out-of-pocket expenses for folks, as well as medical supplies. This bill was passed in the Senate. It actually was flipped in the Senate on the floor. And so it's building momentum. I think there's still, concerns by the committee about, is this a precedent that they want to set? Because there is language in the bill that would, have it be something that PERS rolls out for the first couple of years, and then potentially expanding that, the cap to the private market. So it's really a conversation. It's an old friend, as a lot of people talk about this insulin cap bill. But what we know is it's a life-saving drug for so many folks, and it's going to cap those out-of-pocket expenses. Now, by no means are we knowing that, the cost of insulin isn't going to automatically come down. It doesn't, tell manufacturers that they can, price it any differently. It can still continue to grow. And I think that's the comments that I made to the committee. This will help out-of-pocket expenses for folks that, it's a life or death situation for them with insulin. But we need to look at broader reforms that can really continue to push down on prices, and not just insulin, but all drugs that people need on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was super moving to hear the testimony of those who use insulin as a life-saving drug. Specifically, I think it's Representative McLeod and her testimony as a diabetic herself. Very moving, very, very important. But as you said, hoping we can continue to get the legislature to look beyond this would be a great step and a good step forward, but continue to the need to do more as part of that. So awesome. That's Senate Bill 2140. Again, teaser for you later. If this is an issue you care about, encourage you to start reaching out to your members of the House, because remember, if it's a Senate bill or SB, now that's actually on the House side now. And if it's a House bill, HB, it's actually on the Senate side now. So thanks for that update. Again, it's been a super busy week. So if pensions weren't enough and the insulin cap and RX issues weren't enough, we also were working on our fraud priority this week. So you want to talk a little bit about that, Bill?
Yeah, that was sandwiched in between insulin and pensions this week, but fraud,
it's one of the ones where you had to flip off your shoes, run to the other side of the Capitol. Okay.
Yes. If folks know, I carry backup shoes. They're flats that I carry in my purse that I can put on and off so that I can make it in record pace from one side of the Capitol to the other. But the fraud bill was heard this week in the House Industry, Business, and Labor Committee. There was really good discussions about how many victims in North Dakota really face consumer fraud, but also more broader, looking at that financial, fraud related to this bill. The Commissioner Tyler does a really fantastic job talking about, the impacts that this fraud has on North Dakotans every day, and how this small restitution fund, it's $1 million, and folks are capped at $50,000, but we know that it's a step forward to help folks that have been victimized, and really flipping this issue on its head, and not having folks feel that they've been, scammed and it's their fault and they've been duped, but really flipping it on who are the ones perpetrating these crimes on folks really 65 and older, and how can we potentially give them some restitution. The committee's really interested in the issue. They almost voted on the bill that day, but one committee member asked that it be paused till next week, and he had some questions that he needed clarity on. But by and large, it seems like this bill is well on its way to get a favorable recommendation out of House Industry, Business, and Labor. So
awesome. And thank you for that testimony. And I know you had a very busy day that day, and as part of it. So with that, let's move on to at least the last thing on our list today that we're going to talk about. We could talk about a lot more, but the last thing on our list today that happened this week was, if covering the pension priority, the RX priority, and the fraud priority wasn't enough, we might as well just go for all four, because we were also working on our efforts to help individuals stay safe and independent at home. So talk a little bit about, there was some hearings on Senate Bill 2012, which is the Department of Human Services budget, and specifically the stuff we were looking at on home and community-based services.
Yeah, I wrapped up the week by talking with the House Human Services Human Resource section of Appropriations, really about key components of Senate Bill 2012, or the Department of Health and Human Services budget. Home heating assistance through LIHEAP, looking at SNAP and TANF benefits, looking at really targeted increases in staffing for the Department of Human Services. Their numbers have increased just dramatically since 2020 in terms of people calling and asking for resources, saying, I want to live in my home, I want to live in my community, how can you support that? So I really summed it up for the committee to saying there are tremendous opportunities in that budget and funding that's available to really support folks that want to stay in their home. We know that nursing homes really play an important role, but I think the department has really demonstrated that the tide has shifted a bit, that they are really seeing so many people reaching out to them to say, I don't want to do that. I want to stay here. And how can you help me do that? And the money's available. And we really hope that Appropriations Committee puts some really smart investments into continuing to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, as we talk about all the time, and as those of you watching probably would say yourselves, the number one concern for people as they age is how do they stay safe and independent for as long as they can in their home and the community in which they call home. As part of it. So those enhancements very important, and we continue to fight for those as part of that. So busy week, had a lot going on this week, and next week it doesn't look like it slows down a whole lot. Next week, what I think is probably the first of the major dominoes that need to fall to get the legislature to resolution happens, and that is the updated revenue forecast. Mm-hmm. So it's a little inside baseball, but I think it's important for folks to understand the legislature gets a preliminary budget forecast in December. Then they do an updated legislative forecast, usually the very first part of the session that they all agree to work off of. Mm-hmm. And then after crossover, they always get an updated report on kind of the state of the economy in North Dakota, tax collections, et cetera, that they use as their revenue forecast for making budget decisions and, quite frankly, policy decisions that have budget implications for the rest of the session. So that happens next week, yes?
Mm-hmm. It does. Late Monday into Tuesday and Wednesday, both appropriations committees will hear two different revenue forecasts. There's two different folks that are coming in and talking about really the state of the state as it relates to our funding and our fiscal appropriations. What happens during the first part of the session, as you indicated, they have one revenue forecast. This is a revised one. So they've got placeholders in budgets. So they've got certain priorities. They've kind of set aside money as they see fit to fund those priorities right now. Now, knowing that the new revenue forecast is coming out next week, they can make targeted adjustments. So there's going to be a lot of conversations about where taxes are going to fall, where the funding priorities for education and human services. And the other bill that I talked about earlier this week was the Housing Incentive Fund. That's another really important piece that we support through the Industrial Commission budget. It looks at public partnerships and really expanding that affordable, housing, especially as we know our 65 and older population is going to grow by about 25% over the next several years. So it's an opportunity for people to see, okay, now we know that the numbers are straight. And so now the House and Appropriations, really their work is cut out for them to now that they know how much money they have to work with, where is that money going to be spent and where's it going to be invested and really do great things for North Dakota. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It also looks like there's going to be some discussion next week on maybe one or both of the homestead property tax credit bills that we've been monitoring.
Yep, both homestead tax credit bills are available and up for hearing next week. And again, that's where we really have spent a lot of our time in our conversation. A lot of legislators, ask us, you and me both, when they see us at the Capitol, where do we stand on tax issues, and especially related to property taxes. And we say, the most important thing is the homestead property tax credit. We want more people to know about it. And there's two bills that will make adjustments to that tax credit to make more people eligible for it and make more funding available to it. So again, we hear people all the time. They've lived in their communities for a long time. Their houses are paid off. Property taxes continue to go up. And that's often making them have to make a difficult decision. Do they stay or go? And so this homestead property tax credit not only works for homeowners, but renters. And so if this is something that, folks are interested in, there's two different bills that do a slightly different things, but we know that it's got momentum in both sides of the chambers, and it's a good conversation that's going to happen next week.
Absolutely. And then last but not least, it looks like we're keeping an eye on some voting and elections bills as well.
Yeah, I think Senator Roars, the chair of state and local governments on the Senate side, said they have 15 election and voting related bills they will be considering next week alone. And some of them make minor changes, making ballot access a little bit easier, cleaning up some language. But there are some significant changes that were brought over from the House related to elections and voting. So we'll be hanging out in that committee and making sure that, something we promote all the time, that we want to make sure people have easy access to voting and know how to do it, where to do it. And so that's what we'll be watching next week.
Absolutely. So Janelle, again, very busy week this week. Looks like there's going to be a lot next week happening as well. What do we want folks to take action on, and what do we want them to do this coming weekend and into next week?
The best place to go is our website that's listed on the screen, aarp.org/ND Advocacy. If you have committee members in the House Human Services Committee, which is considering Senate Bill 2140, which is the insulin cap bill, reach out to them and let them know if that's important to you. Same with the pension bills. Senate Bill 2239 is the bill that we're supporting because it does retain the defined benefit package for state and public employees. And if you have a committee member on that House Government and Veterans Affairs, they need to hear from you now. I mean, these are opportunities. We'll make sure that there's up-to-date information on that website and links that you can send emails, or if committee members or your folks are back in their home communities this weekend, have a conversation with them. Let them know that pensions are important to you, or if insulin is, or fraud. This is the time of year that they get inundated with a lot of bills, a lot of information, but the more they hear from their constituents about, what you want them to do, the better. So please reach out, go to that website. The more voices out there, the better for all of us. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, given testimony today, was asked the question about what do our members or older adults think about this was related to the pension bill, specifically as part of it. And, I said, listen, this is the policy position and what we've been hearing and supporting. And the legislator didn't say this, but kind of intimated, well, that's not what I've been hearing from folks. And so so helpful when we're saying one thing, and especially if they're hearing from folks that live in their district, that vote in their district, that are on the ground. And so our job is to try and help you share. And so again, Senate Bill 2239, we're in support of. Senate Bill 2140, reach out to your legislators, let them know you support an insulin cap and ensuring continued access to secure retirement. So with that, Janelle, anything else you want to touch on before we get out of here for the weekend?
No, it's been a good week. We're in a good place, and I'm looking forward to next week to see if we can make some movement on these bills. So.
Yeah, I am as well, and appreciate all of your busy work this week. For the rest of you, I also want to give you a reminder. We did, for those of you who posed questions during the legislative lowdown, we have posted I think we've gotten through about 75 to 80% of them. We still have 15 to 20 or 20 to 25% of the questions to get answers to yet. But if you haven't seen those, aarp.org/ND, it's right on the front page on the upper right-hand corner, or you can get to it, the aarp.org/ND advocacy page as part of that. But go see if we've answered your question. If we haven't, we're working on getting those answers up and loaded as we had promised. So with that, for Janelle Mose, I'm Josh Aspig. This has been another All Things Advocacy.